Hello and welcome to The Radical. I'm Christina.
And I'm Nicole. On our podcast, we delve into the roots of metaphysical wisdom.
That's right, Nicole. Our podcast is all about exploring those fundamental truths and practices that nourish your mind, body, and spirit.
Yes, Christina, we want to make metaphysical concepts easy to understand and accessible, especially for those who don't have a ton of time to do all the research.
Right? We'll do the research as well as share our experiences and perspectives, hoping to empower you, our listener, to find balance and magic in your day-to-day.
Inspired by the essence of the word radical, proceeding from the root, let's explore the roots of well-being and self-healing together.
This is The Radical with Christina and Nicole, two metaphysical girls in the material world. Hello, welcome to our podcast. This is The Radical, and I'm Christina. We're in the process of covering each zodiac sign individually in our first season here in The Radical. And we've already met the personalities of the planets in our previous podcast, as well as the sun and the moon. If you haven't listened to those, go back and give those a listen. But before we get into the birth chart proper, we're going to talk about the celestial bodies and a few birth chart core concepts.
That's right, Christina. So in this first season of The Radical, we're journeying through each astrological sign as they occur on the calendar, meeting the planets, just like Christina said, and other celestial bodies that we're covering today in this episode. And finally, this discussion overall will culminate in an episode dedicated to all things birth chart. And we decided to focus on the birth chart and astrology in this first season because it has been our experience that the birth chart is a really great tool for self-reflection and for gaining a deeper understanding of not only yourself, but also what's happening in the collective.
I found it to be a really great starting point for me because I've learned about the signs, I've learned about the planets, and I've learned some lessons in mathematics and right angles. So I've really grown in knowledge.
We're going to revisit some angles today for sure. There is a lot of math.
A lot of Latin and mythology. So we're just going to get right into the list. Okay. Starting with the rising sign. And I'm starting with this because I didn't know it. I read it, I saw it, I know what my rising sign is, but I didn't really know what it meant. And the first thing is that the rising sign is also known as the ascent. It's the same thing. Again, I thought those were two separate things. So rising sign, known as the ascent, is the zodiac sign that was rising in the east when you were born. It's said to provide insight into a person's personality, how they interact with others, and how they project energy into the world. The north and south nodes. A node in astronomy is the intersection of the orbit plane of some celestial body, such as the moon or a planet or a comet, with the plane of the ecliptic, which is the apparent path of the sun among the stars, okay, as projected on the celestial sphere. So essentially, where they cross paths. A symbolic meaning of the sun and the moon, which astrologically relate to spirit sun and fortune moon, or spirit sun and body, or moon, fortune, and soul. Because the north and the south nodes are mirror images at exactly 180 degrees, they're opposite zodiac signs and opposite astrological houses. They move along the lunar axis and change signs every 1.5 years. And they return to their birth positions every 18 to 19 years. I need to go back and look at all the major life events I've had. The North Node represents what you're growing into and the experiences you need for spiritual growth. It indicates the direction you're meant to evolve. The South Node represents the lessons, wisdoms, and baggage you were born with. Many astrologers believe that your South Node reflects your past lives, who you were, what you learned, and where your soul left off. And guess what, Nicole? Where the nodes are right now, the North Node is in Taurus, and the South Node is in Scorpio. And that's the opposite of my North and South.
Oh, wow.
I'm the opposite. My South Node is in Taurus, and my North Node is in Scorpio. I had a moment where I was like, am I lined up? I'm like, nope, it's the opposite. I don't know what that means, listeners. It's just an interesting point. Midheaven, you'll probably see this as MC, abbreviated as MC on your birth chart, stands for medium coli or colii, which is Latin for middle of the sky. In astrology, midheaven is a point located at the top of the chart at the 12 o'clock position and is marked with a thick line or an arrow pointing up. And the midheaven is also the zodiac sign on the cusp of the 10th house and is often the 10th sign from the rising sign. And this point in your birth chart that represents a person's public image, career path, and goals. You ready to talk about the dwarf planets?
I am. They've been coming up a lot in astrology podcasts lately because a lot of them are moving closer and closer on their orbital plane, closer and closer to Earth. And astrology has a lot to say about these planets.
Also, all our technology is getting so much better in being able to see and watch and analyze these other celestial bodies. When we were doing the research for the personalities of the planets, I was just astounded at the amount of information they have from all the space probes and satellites and telescopes and everything that we have going on in the space programs. It's amazing. The dwarf planet Sirius has an orbit of 1,682 days, which is an orbit around the sun of just 4.6 Earth years. This planet, this dwarf planet Sirius, is the largest object in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. And it's the only dwarf planet within the inner solar system. I didn't know any of this about Sirius. So it's very close to us. Sirius has a very small amount of oxygen, which is mostly locked up in the planet's ice water, binding it to hydrogen atoms. Sirius was a Roman goddess of agriculture, grain and crops, fertility, motherly relationships, and she was depicted as a mature woman. So as a planet in astrology, Sirius represents nurturing, motherhood, and the cycles of nature, and emphasizes themes of abundance, nourishment, and a connection to Earth. I talked about Pluto and the personalities of the planets. So whether you believe it's a planet or a dwarf planet or whatever you want to categorize as our Pluto, it represents transformation, power, and obsession. Haumea is a dwarf planet located beyond Neptune's orbit. So it's way out there. It has an elongated shape. It's shaped like an egg and a rapid rotation. A day on Haumea is about 4 Earth hours. Haumea is the whole... Yeah.
Wow.
She's spinning. And do you know why asteroids get or dwarf planets and asteroids get their unique shapes? Because when they were hit or collided with other objects, they had already cooled. So as they continued to spin, they didn't have the plasticness or the elasticity or the malleability to spin out back into a sphere. And that's why they can still spin, but they're irregularly shaped I did, and that's why the Earth is round, even though we've been plummeted by things through the ages. It's just an interesting thing that why objects have different shapes. Haumea is the Hawaiian goddess of fertility and childbirth. Two of the moons of Haumea, Hayaka is the largest moon, is named after the Hawaiian goddess who was born from Haumea's mouth. And Namaka is named for a water spirit who was born from Haumea's body. And the reason why they chose those names is because those moons seem to be parts of the actual dwarf planet because they're made up of the same thing. So they have a theory that those moons were pieces of the original planet. So that's a nice little story to tie that in together. Haumea represents fertility, family, the importance of nurturing, and also, again, the cyclical nature of life. And Haumea is 285 Earth year orbit around the sun.
That's a long one.
And then Maki is 306 Earth years orbit. So it's a little bit smaller than Pluto, but it's very bright, the second brightest object in the Kuiper belt as seen from Earth. Pluto's the brightest, then Maki. It's named after the god of fertility and the Rapanau mythology, and those are the people native at Easter Island. Maki is covered in bright frozen methane that's tinted red by the presence of complex organic material, so it has a lovely red hue to it as it's seen. It has one moon, and it's officially named MK2. or unofficially nicknamed MK2. Its actual name is S/2015 open parenthesis 136472 close parenthesis 1. So it's easier to say MK2.
Oh. Much easier.
It's the only known moon of the trans-Neptunian dwarf planet Maki. Maki is associated with creation, fertility, and the environment, tying back to the original story of it being a fertility god. Eris, 557 years or Earth years orbit around the sun. And Eris is the most massive and second largest dwarf planet in the solar system. It's about the same size as Pluto, but 3 times farther away from the sun. Eris is all the way out there. It's named for the Greek goddess of discord and strife. So it's, as a planet in astrology, it's associated with strife, discord, and competition specifically. Eris has a fantastic myth about it, about causing one of the main wars in the Greek history, about throwing an apple that 3 goddesses fought over. It's a great myth. I remembered it when I read it, but go look that up if you have an interest in it, and then you'll know why it's associated with strife, discord, and competition. And that brings us to Sedna, 11,400 Earth year orbit. Sedna is the most distant solar system object ever discovered. It is twice as far from the sun as any other solar system object, 3 times farther than Pluto or Neptune. If you were standing on the surface of Sedna, you could block the entire sun with the head of a pin held at arm's length. So it essentially looked like a star. Sedna's surface is characterized by a reddish hue. Again, that's from the organic compounds known as tholins. Complex molecules form when methane, water, and ammonia ice is exposed to the harsh radiation of space. Sedna has the longest orbital period of any known object in our solar system, of its size. Now, the story of Sedna is fascinating and captures my imagination and makes me want to know more. I just summarized that there's many different stories related to Sedna, and she became the goddess of sea and marine animals of the Inuit religion. And each legend has a variation on her death, but generally, she gets her fingers cut off by her father while she's trying to climb up or into a kayak or off of a cliff. And the main theme is that her fingers become the sea mammals, seals, whales, all the sea animals, as she sank to the bottom. And then she herself sank to the bottom of the sea and became the goddess of the sea. As a planet in astrology, it's associated with deep emotional wounds, clearly, ancestral patterns, clearly, because she was damaged by her father, themes of isolation, survival, but also spiritual awakening. Fascinating story, fascinating dwarf planet.
And I've heard it said too with Sedna, it's such deep transformation. It goes beyond change. It is the transformation of one sort of life form into another and being unrecognizable through that transformation. So her fingers transformed into the sea mammals and the eels and all those animals. So a complete transformation in that her fingers were unrecognizable afterwards.
There's also depictions of her as having the head and torso of a woman and the bottom part of her body as a fish. So kind of the original sort of mermaid iconology. But also how revered she was by the Inuit tribe and by the hunters, because they relied on her to provide the seals and the whales and the fish for their livelihood. So the reason why we know of her story today is because she was such an important goddess to those cultures, because she kept them alive. For other celestial bodies, we've got Chiron. Chiron has a 50 Earth year orbit, and it's a small ringed object orbiting the sun between Saturn and Uranus. And it's not necessarily a minor planet or a comet, it's both. So it's called a centaur. A centaur. How do you say that? Centaur. It's a centaur. And so centaurs are not in a stable orbit. So that's why they're comet-like, and will be removed by gravitational influence by the giant planets over periods of millions of years, moving in different orbits or leaving the solar system entirely. And Chiron was a centaur. A centaur. I don't know why this word has got me today. And that's in the Greek mythology, half man, half horse, who was known for his wisdom, knowledge of medicine, and taught and assisted many Greek heroes. But Chiron was accidentally wounded by a poisoned arrow shot by Hercules, that guy, and he gave up his immortality in exchange for being placed in the heavens as the constellation Sagittarius. So the bow and arrow, poison wound, wounded healer, you can kind of see where the themes come from. And it is like Chiron is a minor planet and a comet, just as the centaur was half man, half horse. So you can see how it's kind of in that space. So known as the wounded healer, Chiron represents healing, vulnerability, the journey of overcoming personal wounds. And the placement in your chart is where we may experience pain, but with the opportunity for growth.
That's slowly becoming an inside joke that these painful moments in our life are actually opportunities for growth.
Opportunities for growth.
Said with a little bit of an eye roll.
We have a few more, and I'm just going to go through these kind of quickly. Again, you can always look them up individually on their own. Vesta is in an orbit between Mars and Jupiter. It's a terrestrial object and can be seen on a dark night with the naked eye and associated with devotion, service, and focus. Juno, again, orbiting between Mars and Jupiter. It has a very irregular orbit around the sun. And Juno is a very large asteroid. It's like the size of Maryland, is what I saw. It's like a little state of Maryland asteroid out there, and it's very reflective. And it cannot be classified as a planet because of its irregular shape and small size, but it's pretty big. And then we have Pallas, again between Mars and Jupiter. It has an inclined orbit and it represents wisdom, strategy, and creativity, just like Pallas Athena. Lilith and Black Moon Lilith, I'm going to talk about these two because I feel like these in themselves can be a whole nother podcast that we need to put on the list. But Lilith itself is a metallic asteroid from the middle region of the asteroid belt, and it represents the dark femininity, sexuality, and independence and empowerment. And Black Moon Lilith isn't an actual object, but empty space. The empty space furthest from Earth along the moon's orbital path. The literal lunar dark side, a point representing the apogee of the moon's orbit. And it symbolizes hidden aspects of the self, primal instincts, and raw femininity. So I would love to talk about both of those more because that just kind of cracked open my brain. I'm like, I want to know more about both of those.
The literal lunar dark side.
Yes. So that's our quick list. More of each of those could be a whole podcast in themselves, but this is again like an introduction to the big celestial bodies that you might see on your own birth chart. So go look them up if you have more questions or email us and we'll find out more for you.
A celestial bodies meet and greet, if you will. I have a book sitting next to me that is dedicated just to the dwarf planet Sedna. So there may be a deeper dive coming up sooner rather than later.
I would love to.
In the next, be so fun. In this next segment, I'm going to cover a few concepts as it pertains to utilizing your personal birth chart. So we're going to talk first about something called a transit, which frankly, up until recording this episode, I did not understand. I had heard a lot about transits, but it was not clear to me what it was. So we'll jump in. First, defining a transit. To me, it was important to highlight two sort of key components. The first is your own birth chart, which captures the placements of the sun, moon, planets, and the celestial bodies at the time and place of your birth. And your birth chart is sort of placed on an astrological wheel, which is divided into the houses, the signs. So that's sort of the first component, is having that snapshot. You also need information on the present day placements of the sun, moon, planets, celestial bodies, and their movement. If you compare the movement or the location of the present day planets to your birth chart, and if you see that a present day planet is sort of crossing into an area that's already populated on your birth chart, that's sort of what a transit is describing.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
It would be like, for example, the planet Neptune is in the sign of Capricorn at 3 degrees in my birth chart. So therefore, any planet besides Neptune that is visiting the area near 3 degrees of Capricorn is transiting my natal Neptune. So it's like a visitor. It's visiting that space
Oh,
on your
I
birth
like
chart.
visiting better than transiting. That makes more sense to me.
That helped it click in my head a little bit better as well. So you do need both elements of your birth chart and what's happening present day. So how do we know that a transit is going on? You can, this part's a joke, but you can maintain a table of the planetary positions known as an
Ooh.
ephemeris. And that's a joke because I think only the real deal professional astrologers do that. I found a picture of a very old, probably hundreds, maybe even 1,000 years old, an old ephemeris, and it is all
Oh, I
math.
want to see one.
It is writing down. Yeah, I'll have to post this picture. It's just tracking those positions day by day. You could become aware of a transit from an astrologer who does a podcast, who puts information out on social media, for example. There's also apps you can download. You may or may not have to
Mm.
pay like a subscription for those apps, but listening to astrology podcasts or using apps are going to be the easiest sort of modern day way to know if there's an important transit occurring for you. I want to mention about a transit is the length of the planet's orbit around the sun will determine the duration of a transit, of course. We've talked about this before, but inner planets have a shorter orbit. Those inner planets tend to speak more so to us as individuals, us living our lives sort of on a day-to-day basis, while the outer planets have a longer orbit and the effect is more collective or more sort of thematic over a longer period of time. So just something else to keep in mind when we look at transits and their length. I have an example that will kind of tie all this together, but it's important to mention one other astrology definition, and that is aspects. Aspects are simply geometric angles between planets. The aspects also describe the relational energy between the two planets that are involved and can reveal where there's harmony or disharmony. So I picked an example that I actually think I picked this same example in a previous podcast. So if it sounds familiar, that's good. That's good. So I chose the planet Neptune in the sign of Capricorn. This is the placement in my personal birth chart, but because Neptune is an outer planet and has a longer orbit, a lot of our listeners may also have Neptune in Capricorn. If you were born between 1984 and 1998, you probably also have this placement of
Oh,
Neptune
I'm
in
out of that
Capricorn.
placement.
I
I
know.
think I think
I'm
my Neptune
sorry.
I think my Neptune is in Sagittarius. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead. I'm like, we don't have that in common either.
I'm thinking maybe the only one would be
Yeah.
our Pluto. We'll have to compare.
We'll let you guys know when we find out what it is.
So present day, and this is being recorded on November 5th, 2024. So Present day, Saturn is in Pisces from March 2023 through May of 2025. So when we are doing our interpretation, we are looking at the symbolism of the planets themselves. So in this example, Neptune and Saturn are the two planets involved. We'll look at the symbolism of the zodiac sign. We'll look at Pisces and Capricorn. And then the third element is that aspect. So again, the geometric angle that the planets are forming. And that's basically, to make it really simple, your formula for interpretation. So you kind of gather your components and then break down the symbology and put it all together for an interpretation. So as an example, we'll kind of step through this together. Saturn is all about self-discipline, responsibility. Neptune is more about dreams, illusions, our spirituality. Pisces really does have that same symbolism, the dreams, the illusions, the spirituality. It's kind of Capricorn sounds a lot like Saturn in this example. It's about self-reliance, self-mastery, discipline, and ambition. And during these dates that I mentioned, Saturn in Pisces, March of 2023 through May of 2025, Saturn is making a 60-degree angle to, quote unquote, our natal Neptune. So the listeners who share that with me, this is forming a sextile. That's the name for a 60-degree angle. And that symbolism is flow, ease, harmony, cooperation.
Okay.
So with this harmonious sextile aspect, and once you look at, like I said, those different components in their symbolism, you could land on an interpretation that is something like this being a favorable time to root ideas into the ground, especially pertaining to dreams you have, your spirituality, sort of more idealistic type ideas. It's a really great time to get those into the ground and to help them grow. And because this is dealing with an outer planet, your interpretation might also say that this speaks to the collective more so than simply just at the individual level. And during this time, my generational fellows could feel more ease, harmony, and cooperation in terms of bringing their dreams and spiritual essence out of sort of what I like to call like the pure potential and into a tangible form. So from your imagination into the real world, and doing so with discipline and responsibility. So that's one example of how we can use transits in combination with our birth chart to arrive at an interpretation of what's happening today and what it means for us based on our particular birth charts.
Nice.
I think it's just so, it gives me so much hope. I feel like, you know, we're recording this. I already mentioned the date. It's election day. But what astrology does for me is gives me hope and gives me a view of the bigger picture. Yes. Because I would much rather focus on me and my fellows working together in harmony and cooperating to make spiritual dreams a reality. That just sounds so lovely.
I agree with you 100%.
I have a teeny bit more to go through. There are some other aspects that I want to mention. In my example, the sextile, or that 60-degree angle, symbolizes flow, ease, cooperation, and harmony. A trine, or a 120-degree angle, shares that energy. It's tied to blessings, our innate gifts and opportunities. It's flowing and easy, just like that sextile energy. And because everything's math, you can remember that the 60 and 120 go together, because 60 doubled is 120. So in my mind, that's how I relate them. There's another pair that goes together, a square and an opposition. And yes, just sort of like it sounds, this is an angle that, really two angles that represent difficulty, friction, tension, conflict, and challenge. Our square is the 90-degree angle. Opposition, the 180-degree angle. The opposition is a bit more challenging, sort of like a tug of war, total opposition, totally polarized.
That's like the North and the South node.
Yes. Exactly. Perfect example.
I just realized that as you were saying that, I was like, oh, that's why you should be moved. Well, your life's journey is to be moving towards your North node, no matter how difficult and scary and uncertain that seems. And your comfort is your South node, where you're comfortable. Completely. Like every decision we make, you can distill it down to like, are you moving closer to your North node or closer to your South node? Absolutely. That just dawned on me.
Absolutely. We had a conversation during our travels the past several days about our North and South nodes. And I remember asking you, Christina, or we asked each other, are there any pairs, any zodiac pairs in terms of the North node and the South node that have it easier than we do? And I think based on this definition of opposition, polarized tug of war, no, I don't think. As we keep exploring each sign, that'll be fun to consider. Do they have it easier than me? But I think by design, our North and South node journey is supposed to feel very tricky, very challenging.
Scorpio is my North node, and that is terrifying to me. To lay my soul bare and to go into deep emotional transparency. That's how I know it's right. That's how I know it's like, that must be it, because that completely scares me. But if I was another type of person, another sign or whatever, they'd be like, oh, I can do that all day. I love to sit around and talk about my emotions. It's just not. So that's why we kind of have the path that's just for us.
That was the perfect example. A conjunction is when the planets are in the same sign and at a close degree. So you're kind of thinking 0 degrees of separation, but a close degree really means within 6 to 8 degrees of each other. So it's a tighter aspect, but essentially they're conjoined. Junction symbolizes a fusion and a blend of the energies. It's enmeshed, sometimes indistinguishable. So it's powerful, but you do want to have an awareness that a lot of times in a conjunction, it's not clear which energy is coming from which planet. Are other aspects called minor aspects, but for today's podcast, the minor aspects are beyond the scope, and I really just wanted to focus on these major ones.
They are beyond the scope of today's podcast. I love that phrase.
Plus, you would probably turn me off. Because there's quite a few of them.
We'll get to them. Listeners, we will get to all of them because as we explore our own birth charts, as we continue on this season, we will probably, well, I'm certain we'll discuss all of them because we're talking about our own birth charts.
They come up and you'll hear other astrologers mention them. And as long as you have the core understanding of it's really just the angle they're making, and that angle can symbolize the nature of the energy and how that relationship between the planets is kind of going to be expressed, if it's more harmonious or more challenging. That's really the big takeaway here. You'll hear aspects used to describe transits, but also planetary relationships in your own birth chart. We already made the joke that a difficult square or opposition may provide challenges, but also an opportunity to learn and grow. Things are neither good nor bad, we make them so.
Yes.
So with that being said, if you hear square, opposition, it really is up to us to frame our mindset accordingly. I know it is cliche and kind of funny to change the word challenge to opportunity, but it does make a big difference. And with all that being said, I just want to throw out a reminder that all astrology aspects, transits, and so on do not necessarily predict the future or ensure an outcome. If you believe something bad is going to happen, the bad thing happens because that's what you're watering in your mind and giving your attention to. Astrology and our interpretations really are there to be descriptions of the energies and the relationships between the energies. But we really give meaning and power to what we believe. Each individual human soul has free will and can therefore decide for themselves how to engage with and direct these energies within their own lives. So it's really just information, and it's not meant to steer you and dictate your life, your emotions, or your experiences. And that's all I got.
Yes. Information. Segment 3. We're going to get right into it. It's our oracle cards. Today I'm drawing 3 cards from the Goddess Power Oracle Guidebook by Colette Baron Reed. I've chosen 3 cards. Well, the cards have been... I said I chose them. And then I wanted to say the cards have chosen us today. So pick A, B, or C. And card A is Anye, adaptability. The empowerment message for Anye: when you've set intentions for how your life could be different, better, fuller, juicier, prosperous, creative, more meaningful, etc., adaptability is the power you'll need to rely on. The old familiar you, the one who is used to your comfort zone, is now invited to dance in uncharted territory. The questions to ask yourself as you step into the unknown are: who do I need to become in order to experience this life I desire? What in me needs to shift so that I can welcome this amazing abundance? Know you have everything you need right now. You are aligned with the Celtic shapeshifter goddess Anye, who could move effortlessly between our world and the world of the fairy. Her power of adaptability is sparkling within you. Magic is afoot. Card B. Sophia, divine wisdom. Her empowerment message: human wisdom comes from personal experience, but divine wisdom is unknown to our life experience. When we ask for help, we are asking for guidance from a source greater than us, a great unknowable mystery. When we receive it, it is often life-altering and affects us in ways beyond our comprehension. The Gnostic goddess Sophia, who brought the material world into being, arrives to show you how fate and destiny operate in relationship to synchronicity. When you least expect it, opportunities and meetings spring up as if out of nowhere. Your life begins to work out, and you sense your alignment with a higher purpose and power. Trust you are divinely protected and directed. Practice the act of faith before results. This is an essential key in co-creating your world. And card C, Mama Kila, the moon. Her empowerment message: Mama Kila, the Incan goddess of the moon, presides over the power of cycles and seasons. The moon rules the night sky, returning full 13 times in a year. The ancients marked time by the moon to know when to plant, when to harvest, when to store food, and when to celebrate fertility. Right now, you are invited to see what is familiar and decide whether you need to improve on it or leave things as they are. The answer to your inquiry can be found in the timing of things and the cycle you're in. You can apply the idea of natural cycles to relationships, creative projects, personal growth, and more. If you are honest with yourself, you will see there is no way to control these cycles, only to use the creative energy they offer to help you. If your relationship is unclear yet brimming with potential, you might turn to the new moon energy that shows up in the spring cycle of life. In that case, you just need to allow the relationship to grow naturally and be clear in your intentions. When your outer world seems to be slowing down, with obstacles rising up and temporarily blocking your every move, do not put up resistance. Instead, take advantage of the need to rest and recalibrate your intentions as you wait for the cycle to change. No matter what, like the cycles of the moon, there is divine order in everything that is happening in your life right now. Once you know this, the goddess Mama Kila welcomes you to her divine moon dance of co-creation. There we go, our messages from the universe, Goddess Oracle deck. We'll take pictures of these beautiful cards and post them so that you can see the images that come with these really beautiful messages.
Thank you, Christina. Those were
right.
awesome.
It's almost like too much information, too much synchronicity.
I know what you mean.
I cleaned up my little office space here because we were out of town. Nicole and I just got back from traveling, and so my birth charts are put away. But whenever we start talking about birth charts or planets or signs, I'm like, where are they? I want to look at them. Where is my Pluto? I want to send Nicole a text message. Where's her Pluto? Like, my brain is always wanting to figure out and to learn more about my birth chart. And the fact is that what I've learned as we started this podcast is to do it piece by piece, sign by sign, planet by planet, house by house. Take your time and just learn it piece by piece. learn the personalities of the planets. We have a season of talking about the houses and what they are and why they're important and what they mean, because I'm a little unclear on that. But learning about each individual astrological sign has been a game changer for me. Talking about the season that they're in, and we talked about the wheel of the year and how it's all a cycle
Mm-hmm.
and how all the energies
I think
affect
that's,
us.
yes. I think that's a really good point. We start looking at our birth chart, and maybe you just focus on your sun and moon sign to start with. And then maybe you look at one of your planets. And it is so deep and so complex. And I mean, I've learned more in the last year, and I still don't know so
Yeah.
much.
It's
I just learned the aspects and the transits. And I'm sure if we went back a couple episodes, I could say, I learned this or that. That's why I made and posted those little cheat sheets to our Instagram, because there is no way I'm retaining that information. And I barely can tell you outside of my big three where my planets are. I always have to go back and look at my birth chart to tell you what sign Mars is in. So these things do take time to learn, but you can always have your little cheat sheets in your notes and use the resources available to you. It's not like you listen to this podcast one time and you're going to be like a professional. You know, it's not like that at all. I rely on my notes and my cheat sheets, and on my birth chart, I mean, I have tons of notes scribbled and written down that I've just accumulated from many different people, many different sources, things that resonate with me. So it's just a process. And I don't know. I don't know if I like that we'll never really know everything, or if that's why I like it, because I'll never stop learning.
Don't look at it as a picture of you. Look at it as the book of you. And each chapter, you're learning more about yourself. We're not going to have it all memorized.
And each time you look at it, each time you look at your birth chart, you're looking at it with a new set of eyes, because you as a person keep changing. So you might read the same section in your birth chart. You know, I have one that I paid for, and it gives nice little summaries of each placement. And I swear that synopsis changes each time. But it doesn't change. I change. I read it differently each time. I notice something new. And that's sort of the fun in all this.
And it is. It's our intention is that it is information, and we are in charge of how we process that information. Well, that's all I have, Nicole. I could say a lot more, but we're at the end. We can't go for another 30 minutes. I have to keep my thoughts to myself until the next podcast.
We definitely could, though. We definitely could. Next time, we're going to be talking all about Sagittarius. I feel like it's been a little bit since our last dedicated podcast on a zodiac sign, but with Sagittarius coming up,
that's my moon sign. And as I am moving into another chapter of my life, my moon sign is becoming more and more and more prevalent, and I'm relating to it more, and I'm learning a lot more about it. So I'm ready to talk about Sagittarius. And we just talked about Chiron. the constellation. You see how it's all connected? Layers on top of layers.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually didn't know that about Chiron, so you taught me that. I'm going to have to remember that going into Sagittarius. That kind of
It's all connected.
gives it a it gives it a little bit of a different vibe to me, knowing that it's so closely related to Chiron. So, yay, that is next week. We're so excited.
Yes.
In between now and then, I think we're just going to be sleeping a ton from our travels and our time travels.
Little jet lag plus daylight savings got me and Nicole right on the same day.
Yeah. The day we got back to the East Coast from the West Coast, it was daylight savings time. So we are still trying to, at least I know what day it is now. At least I know what day it is now. That was not the case when I first got back.
I don't know how we got to Tuesday from when we landed. So we're going to move on from our day, continue to get rest and lots of daylight, right? Because that's going to help us.
Yeah.
And work on Sagittarius for you guys, our wonderful listeners, for next week.
Yay.
So thank you so much. Email us if you have any questions or anything you guys want to chat about, and we will talk to you soon.
Yes. Thank you, listeners. Always a pleasure chatting with you. Talk next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Radical. The Radical is written and produced by Nicole and Christina.
Listener questions can be emailed to us at theradicalpodnc@gmail.com.
Our Instagram is The Radical Pod.
Music by Van Horton. His Instagram is Van Horton Music.